I, as an athlete, am all for getting jacked. More muscle usually translates into a better life, longevity, better health, and in so many areas, an easier life in the way in which us evolvers, we really appreciate. But I want to make sure that we're talking about psychological jackedness, if you will, in this video, which is where acceptance and commitment therapy, the concept about psychological flexibility, starts to come into play. And honestly, I don't hear people talk about it enough. What the heck is psychological flexibility, Amelia? Well, let me pull up a seat. It is the ability to stay present. Yes, picture the classical monk or cross-legged Buddha, to stay present with those difficult feelings, thoughts, emotions, and reality, while still, keyword still, choosing actions that align with your values. And I think this matters a lot because a lot of people misunderstand acceptance. And so therefore, we don't necessarily get jacked in it, if you will. They think acceptance means, I'm okay with this, crossing the box. I approve, get that stamp of approval right on up. I approve of this. I'm giving up, or this is all I get. But real acceptance, my friends, is not giving up at all. It is the moment that you stop fighting the reality that you are living in long enough to respond to it. And might I add, respond to it meaningfully, because you cannot change that which you cannot first tell the truth about. Hey there, Evolver. If you have found this channel, you're probably someone who thinks deeply about life, growth, and the human mind. My name is Amelia, and this is a channel where we explore the psychology, neuroscience, and lived experience of what it actually means to evolve as a human being. In my work with individuals, couples, and leaders, this is one of the biggest turning points that I see. People will often spend enormous amount of time, energy, and money sometimes arguing with the reality that they are living in. Not because they're weak, not because they're completely irrational and not living inside their heads at all, but because cue the song that you have playing, the truth hurts. The truth hurts so bad. People think that this should have never happened. They should have been different. I should have obviously been further along. And I should not feel this. This should not be hard. And sometimes those statements, you hear a couple of shoulds in there, are understandable, right? Like, let's get it. Life is hard. Period. We know this. And, sometimes they are morally true when we look at those sentiments, right? But it should not have happened. When we think about that, like, maybe what has happened to you should not have happened. Maybe someone absolutely should have done better. And maybe you, dear Evolver, should have deserved more. But healing and growth often require a huge shift from this should not be true to this is true, and now what? That is acceptance. It's not approval. It's not agreement. It's not surrendering your standards. It's not lying to yourself. It's not pretending it doesn't matter, but meeting reality directly head on enough to regain your agency. So in the last video at EVE, we talked about forgiveness, we talked about reconciliation, we talked about trust, we talked about everything in between. And the difference between forgiving internally and giving someone else access relationally. Acceptance in this whole concept is connected to that. right? Especially when we talk about human relationships with other humans and reality that we live in and out of. Because acceptance is connected, because sometimes the hardest part for us humans is not deciding whether to forgive. It is accepting what the freak the reality in the relationship that we are trying to coexist in actually is. Accepting what someone is capable of right now. Not in the future, right now. Accepting what did happen. Not what you wanted to happen, but what did. Accepting also what didn't happen and what you really, really wanted to happen. Accepting that the trust that you had with that person, might not be rebuilt just because you wish it could be. And that kind of acceptance, it can be painful. As a matter of fact, there is pain woven in and out of all of those scenarios. But that pain and acceptance can also be tremendously, powerfully clarifying. And might I add a little bit of liberating? And here's the distinction that I want you to hold. Let's kind of look at acceptance. So acceptance says I'm willing to see what is true, like right in front of me. I'm looking at it, I'm seeing it, and I see what the heck is true. Approval, on the other hand, it says I am saying that this, whatever this is in your world, this was okay. Resignation, on the other hand, it says, well, nothing's gonna change. Nothing can change. Nothing will change. But all of those three elements, those are not the same. You can accept that something happened without approving of it. Here comes those dualities again. You can accept that someone is not safe without hating their guts. You can accept your current capacity without deciding that you will never grow. And you can accept reality and still choose change. In fact, actually, acceptance is often what makes meaningful change even possible. And this is where I think the coolest aspect of change, that it has like acceptance just smack dab in the middle of it, where when we think about change, it's honestly something that I find, again, we're not psychologically jacked in. A duality you might not feel like you have access to right now. And that's okay. That is where this journey, we're going to walk with you on that. Because meaningful acceptance, it changes your world. And I know it changed mine. It still is changing mine. And there's so many people who benefit from really getting psychologically jacked in this, right? That psychological flexibility that's at the cornerstone, the heart of acceptance and commitment therapy. And this helps so much because what I find, and I'm looking down at my Remarkable, just let me move my mic a little bit. My little Remarkable here. I have some notes here. When we don't accept reality, we're draining the most precious life force that we have, our energy, our focus, our cognitive capacities, our starlight, whatever you want to call it. We are literally draining that. And what I've come to find again and again is that we are incredible storytellers as human beings, and sometimes those stories are what drains that life force. So I have a couple examples that I want to give, and I want to, looking down at my Remarkable, there's 3 that I have here, as I always try to have in these videos. And I have names, so obviously keeping them anonymous as always. But I want you thinking about, of the 3 examples that I have here, which one resonates most with you? Which one resonates most with your story, maybe with what you have been through? And I want you to kind of think about it. What is the pattern that you notice? What comes up as I share this person's story and what they've gone through, and where ultimately their level of capacity seems to kind of tip the scales. So, first one, accepting actual capacity. I have written down. Whew. All right. How do we do that? Well, here's the thing. A lot of us have been feeling very burnt out lately. And I'm saying that because I have an ear to the ground in the Evolve community, the We University, and there are so many individuals that are finding these videos, that are finding these podcasts that we have. And it's amazing. There's so many amazing things that are happening right now where Google is working in our favor and finally connecting us with people who really are getting helped by what we do in the world. And that's amazing. And what I'm hearing, boots on the ground again and again, is that we are overrun. We as human beings are burning out. We are overwhelmed. And a simple example that I consistently see, one of my clients' names showing up right here. We are adding more to our plates than we can currently handle with our capacity. So what does that actually mean? Well, in this simple example, I'm talking about capacity in terms of what we can handle in our nervous system. This special someone is absolutely exhausted. Their body is giving them signals, throwing up practically flares. And those flares are coming out and really sharing the fact that they are wicked irritable. What they're experiencing cognitively is just complete brain fog. From a mood standpoint, they are finding themselves even more resentful and depleted. But instead of actually accepting this person's actual capacity, right, she's arguing with it. And some of the things that I hear coming from her mouth is what I'm hearing in so many people. I should be able to handle this. Well, heck, other people do more. Or, well, Amelia, I just need to push through, right? Grind through. I can't slow down right now. I have insert all of these things of why this person should keep going, should keep grinding through, should not slow down. So what happens? Well, building a life that is around this imaginary capacity. This person, in her head, she literally has a capacity that's like Superwoman. But yet then she feels super confused when her body is shutting down on her and quite literally is refusing to keep up. So in her story, this one might resonate with you. Acceptance might sound like, for her, my capacity is lower than what I want it to be right now. And that is not a weakness. That is data. And once you can accept the data that your body, that your mind, that your emotions are signaling to you, trying to throw up a red flare, what happens? Well, like her, you can make better decisions. Be a little bit more gentle on yourself. Now, this is where I hear so many clients, so many community members saying, well, I can't just reach into gentleness. That's not necessarily a skill that I have. Well, I hear you. Okay, we can work on that. But here's the thing. You truly cannot build a sustainable life that is just consistently built on denied capacity. That is like, it's like trying to build a building on cement that never solidifies. Like when you really think about that. And I mean, what happens there? Well, acceptance, it lets you actually plan from the reality instead of shame. So think of a building again. You're actually building on solidified cement blocks. You can build from there. If you are constantly denying your capacity, it is like trying to build anything, a house, a sturdy house, on cement that won't actually harden. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. So this is the struggle she's going through. And it's quite the journey, because accepting that she's not Superwoman, let's just say that's been hard. Example number 2, accepting a pattern I have labeled here. Now, this is accepting a pattern of someone else. Now, when we are in relationships with other people, I find that some of the most interpersonal challenges we experience is because we just cannot seem to, for one reason or another, just accept the person and their patterns for who and what they are, for the evidence that we're seeing. So this is that example in relationships. If you've been there, this is going to resonate so deeply. Because what happens? Well, you ultimately find yourself in these loops of hope. Hope, hope, hope. You just hope someone's going to respond a little bit differently to you. You explain again. You soften again. You might even try a new angle. You might try to give them more context. You might even wait for the version of them you know that they could become. To the point where the cows are coming home and they're still not that version. So the pattern keeps repeating. They dismiss you. They avoid you. They apologize without changing. They might even make promises without any shred of evidence that comes forward and is like, hey, I'm changing. The pattern's broken. And acceptance, in contrary to that, it might sound like, woof, I see the pattern. This is that pattern. And usually it comes with like that feeling of like, ooh, that dread. And it's genuinely not. This is all they will ever be, right? We're not blanket statementing when it comes to acceptance. And it's absolutely not. Well, they are bad. They're just bad. And it's absolutely not, well, I guess I just have to cut them off immediately. No, absolutely not. Just simply acceptance in a situation like this. This is the pattern. And I need to make choices based on the pattern, not the potential that I want to see. So the person that I have written down here, his mother has such a pattern of getting super mature again and again and again. And as the sun starts to set, the more the impulse control happens, the lack of impulse control is happening, meaning there's fights that will erupt or there's challenging conversations that never end up well. And for this person, the pattern has been clocked, but the acceptance that she is this way and this pattern keeps showing up and she's not going to change and has no intention to change anytime soon, that brings a lot of grief inside of him. That makes him just go batshit crazy, honestly. But acceptance for him was really just clocking objectively the evidence that I see in front of me. It's a pattern. And I know she gets immature, and I know she gets snippy, and I know she gets rude at night. And I need to make choices based on this pattern that I'm seeing, that snippiness, not the potential that I want her to be stepping into every single time I want to talk to her at night. And there's a lot of those that are happening all the time. I hear them all the time. And that's the thing about patterns in people. Because patterns in people, when we don't see them, what are we looking at? We're simply imagining potential. And potential, what does that do? Well, it can keep us ultimately attached to this imagined future, this imagined person, this imagined relationship. Acceptance, on the other hand, it brings us back to the evidence of what we see right in front of us, of what we hear again and again. It brings us back to the evidence of the present moment. And that's honestly, I find for a lot of heavy cognitive processors, people that are really analytical, are very heavy in the math mind, let's say, it's difficult because you always see potential, right? People that are really creative, they see potential. They imagine these potential relationships. They imagine, and that creativity can go a long way. And it goes a long way to where it gets to become denial. And denial happens after that resistance. There's this constant resistance between what we want and what is. And so either we accept it or we have to create these stories. And that's a whole thing. So example number 3 is where self-acceptance comes in. Now, accepting where you are in growth is one of the biggest patterns that I see when it comes to people who are evolvers and are stepping into acceptance and trying to exercise this acceptance skill. Cue the eye roll of so many people who are like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can accept this. I don't know if I agree with it. Well, let's go back to the very beginning. Acceptance doesn't inherently mean that you agree or you have a stamp of approval. Cue the difference. Okay. So now let's talk about where you are in your growth journey, right? So this is where the Kristen Neff's research on self-acceptance, it's been profoundly helpful for so many people, because self-acceptance and self-compassion, they do really go hand in hand. And when we carry so much shame because we're in resistance, we're in denial, we're telling these stories to ourselves about ourselves, others, and the world, instead of just accepting for what is and what's right in front of us in the present moment, right? Draining that life force energy that we have, that creates shame. And we carry that around in our nervous systems all the time. We'll talk about that in a sec. So, accepting where you are in growth. So in personal growth, we know this. If you're on this video and you got into this, well, if we are on a growth journey, which obviously if you're listening right now, you are on a growth journey, and you might be even aware of a pattern that you might have and still not be able to fully get out of it. Now, why? I had someone just message me actually before I got recording this. She is 64 years old and she's found the community. Shout out to you if you are listening. And she has shared that she's done the work and that she's, really participated actively in her personal growth journey, but yet she still feels really stuck. And when she found Evolve, when she found me, and she was like, I'm so impressed with what you guys do. And I want to learn more and I want to lean in. Now, she's in a very different personal growth journey than someone who might just be starting out, right? But this pattern, it shows up again and again. It shows up in our personal growth when we realize that we are aware of the pattern that we might be running and yet not still fully out of it, right? 1 foot in, 1 foot out, struggling, but yet have had movement. You might understand that your nervous system, right? Your nervous system, right? It gets activated in these areas and it still gets activated, maybe in your own personal growth journey. And you might know cognitively, right, why you people please and still catch yourself, in fact, doing it in real time. Insert foot in mouth when you say yes, and then you realize you should have said no. In those moments, we have these opportunities to work with what we have, to accept what is. And we might even know where that boundary that we said we were going to place, where we didn't place it. We might know that boundary, know that we didn't place it. Or we might know that boundary and still feel guilty setting it. Right? A lot of people will turn all those experiences, all of those, I didn't fulfill that imagined potential, into shame. What happens in their head is, well, I should have known better, Amelia. I already have worked on this. I've already done the classes. I'm 64 years old and I've already done the quote unquote work. Why the heck am I still here? Now, granted, I'm really grateful that you're still searching for answers, because regardless of where you are on your growth journey, that is not giving up on yourself. Instead of asking, why am I still here, though, change the frame a little bit, because underneath that is embedded this expectation that you should be somewhere else. You hear that potential, that imagined future, that imagined version of yourself that you didn't realize was an unconscious expectation on this growth journey of yours? Not to call it out, but to call it out. This is, in fact, the opposite of acceptance. And so now, instead of asking that question, why the heck am I still here? What acceptance in a situation like this says, this is where I am. And self-compassion, as that comes into the fold, what it says is, oh, I can meet myself here without making it where I am meaning something terrible about who I am, right? I'm not going to go into that meaning making. You don't need to be mean to yourself. You don't have to have it mean something terrible about who you are as a person, right? That is where growth actually becomes possible. What does shame do? Shame freezes your growth. So while you might be trying to get there, why am I not there yet? Why am I here? Why am I still doing this? That's literally freezing your growth, the growth that you could be having if you accept, when you accept. Because acceptance, it gives growth a place to root, to begin. And that's where I love that seed of potential visual coming to mind. Picture in a garden, right? You're able to kind of see below the surface. Acceptance finally is like that seed's planted in the dirt and the first little root comes out into the soil, right? Change begins happening there. So I said that we're going to come to the nervous system. Now, I wanted to shout out someone that I heard come into. So every single month we do, Alan, my partner, and I, we do a relationship talks event that's all about relationships. And the last one that we had done was about how to raise your standards and self-worth. And that was our 61st event that we had done. And it was a really powerful one that in real time, we were talking about, how many years have you been in a relationship and maybe stayed too long? And there was a person that virtually raised their hand and they had said, I've been in a relationship, or I've tolerated, right, a relationship that, wasn't great for me for over 15 years. And in the chat, there were so many people that were, 5 years, 8 years, 7 years, 6 years, 3 years, all over the map. And why I want to call that forward is because that is exactly the type of growth and transformation that can happen in trauma-informed, safe, and anti-shame spaces. Because that person felt safe enough to come forward and just name what was happening. Not the I should be out of this already. Not I should have been XYZ. We didn't hear that. What we heard instead was just an acknowledgement of where she was. And so what happened if that didn't happen for her? If she wasn't able to accept where she is, she wouldn't have that root that is now happening, that she's come back and shared with us, like, change is happening. Why? Because she didn't go into a shame response. She didn't just deny where she's been. In fact, she did quite the opposite. She named where she's been. She named where she is, and she accepted how long she's been in something maybe she hasn't, right? Or that she hasn't wanted to be in. And that's change. That's absolute change. So let's dig into this nervous system layer, right? We have 3 examples. Hopefully one by now has resonated with you. And from a nervous system perspective, of course, we have to look at how acceptance and being psychologically jacked actually matters, right? Psychologically flexible, if you will, right? Well, from a nervous system perspective, acceptance matters because fighting reality is literally activating. Remember earlier when I said you're draining your life force energy, and it's just a huge energy suck to be such a storyteller and in denial versus just being in the truth, right? Imagination versus the present moment. Fighting reality activates your nervous system because when your system is locked into that resistance, what is happening? Well, it's literally doing that scanning thing. Right? It's often finding that thing, that little door, right? That little door that you need to open up into to try to climb or find a way out of what has already happened or what is already true. So if you're overwhelmed, if you're burnt out, your nervous system might actually be locked into that resistance. And you might never have come to that conclusion on your own accord or realize, oh, you know what, I'm just really good at rejecting reality. Or I'm just really not the best skilled in acceptance. No, none of us really comes to that. Why? Well, because we're not as tapped into our nervous systems as we could be. So What is happening when you are in that resistance? You're rejecting reality and you're scanning for a way out of what has already happened or what is already true. Your nervous system, it's arguing, it's bargaining, it's minimizing, it's fantasizing, it is overthinking. It tries like heck to control. And sometimes that resistance is, in fact, protective and it has a protective underbelly. What does it do? Why is it there? Well, it's giving you time. It's buffering the pain. It helps you to survive what you felt you weren't ready to feel all at once, right? So it's not a bad thing. It's protective and we understand it. So we don't shame that resistance. We don't shame that bargaining. We don't shame anything. But eventually, if you want agency, your nervous system has to reorient to what is actually here. Because agency begins where denial ends. I'm going to say that again. I needed this line so many times, and it happens again and again. Agency begins where denial ends. You ever walk into a friend's house and there's that micro moment where you realize that they have a lot of stuff, or maybe you walk around your own house and you look at all of the things that you created a story that you were going to do or make or wear or create, and it's just sitting there collecting dust. I think that our lives, our homes are such a representation of this psychological flexibility, acceptance in real time, because clutter is often developed when there are stories that we're telling ourselves that never actually come true. I'll give you an example. You tell yourself that you are going to wear that outfit when you eventually go to that equestrian event. You buy yourself that set of shoes because you can literally see yourself stomping through the puddles. Or you have this new chainsaw and you told yourself a story you were finally going to take care of the trees in the back that are like hanging over your house. All that stuff, it collects in the house. It collects in your garages. It collects in your pool houses. And we can look around our spaces and quite literally just see stories that we've told ourselves, that resistance that our nervous system has been carrying. And what we don't realize is that we're unconsciously shaming ourselves every time we look at that, because that story never actually got fulfilled. Instead of just accepting at a nervous system layer, accepting that this is a story that is meant to reject the truth that I'm trying to run away from. So I'll say it again. Eventually, if you want agency, the system has to reorient to what is actually here, because agency begins where denial ends, okay? And this is where a lot of the freaking advice that's out there about acceptance, about becoming, it becomes way too shallow and too freaking fluffy, because people say, well, just accept it. Just let it go. Move on. But acceptance is not a mindset trick, despite what we all think it is. And it just feels this untouchable thing that just happens overnight. Why? Well, let's talk about the nervous system. It is often a nervous system process outside of what we've already talked about. It doesn't just happen overnight. You can't just let it go. Why? Why, Amelia? Why can't I just let it go? I need the relief. I can't carry this nervous system. I can't carry this resistance. I can't be overwhelmed right now. I need this capacity. I hear you. It's often a nervous system process because accepting reality may actually require you to grieve the reality that you wanted, the childhood that you never got, the apology that never came and should have, the capacity that you do not currently have because you are going through something horrible right now. There is a crisis in your family, and that is why the relationship cannot become what you had hoped. The version of yourself that you thought you would be by now, that's why. Accepting reality may require actually grieving that reality that you wanted. And maybe you're not in that place that you thought you would be by now. Maybe you've been sold a lie by someone because all of this, just let it go and I'll be fine, it'll all work out. Maybe you bought a course and it'll just all work out and you'll get all the success. Well, we seem to have missed a really big aspect of change where acceptance, that big thing that seems so easy to do, just let it go. Well, it also includes one of the most complex processes of human emotion ever, maybe, because real acceptance often includes grief, that big GRIEF word that so few of us have been taught and modeled to actually navigate the ups and downs and lack of linear emotional processes that are highly complex emotions. And that is why it cannot just be rushed. And that is why you cannot just let it go. It'll all be fine. It'll work out. That is why I am trying to make sure that I am not a part of that equation. That is why I'm trying to make sure that you get psychologically jacked, because there's so much more to this and no one ever taught you. And this is why this process cannot be rushed. So stick with me. Let's hammer out the identity integration layer. This is so important because if we're not talking about identity, the 3 tools that I'm going to give you, it's just going to go pop right off and not actually land. So let's talk about how acceptance actually touches the identity. Because sometimes, ultimately, when we look at it, we actually resist reality because accepting it would change the story and the stories about ourselves, others, and the world around us that we have been living cozy inside. And if I accept that I am burnt out, or maybe I don't have enough capacity to kind of navigate the household the way in which I want to, the standards that I want to, make sure the kids have everything that they need because I want to, maybe I cannot keep being the endlessly capable one, the one that I don't need anyone. If I accept that this relationship is finally, for the first time, not safe and never has been for me, well, shoot, maybe I cannot keep being that person who always just gives another chance. If I accept that I need support out of everyone else, maybe I cannot keep identifying as the one who doesn't need anything. And if I accept that I'm still healing, I'm still on this growth journey, maybe I can't keep pretending I'm already past it. So acceptance, what it actually does, it threatens the identity that helps us survive. But it can also open the door to a very and much more true one. And that's why I think it's really cool. So I've officially nerded out on this one, and I hope you've stuck with me long enough to go through the 3-step process that I will give clients again and again. And I will say, setting expectations, it's not easy. So if you are practicing acceptance and you want to begin, let's start here. Step number 1, I have written on my Remarkable. Let's name the reality without, though, this key component, adding a story. Yes, I said without adding a story. This happened. This is my capacity. This is the pattern. I am still affected by this. I do not feel safe here. I need more time. Just keep it clean. Reality first. Interpretation second. Honestly, if you want to check that out, I celebrate you. I have tried to do this, and it is honestly a lot easier said than done. So if you're struggling with this first step, I see you. All right, step number 2. Can we just let the feeling exist without making it the enemy, or like without villainizing the emotion or the emotional process? That's number 2. Let the feeling exist without villainizing it. We do not need to make the feeling your enemy, because acceptance does not mean you will like what you see, you will like what you feel. And that, my friends, is critical, because you may feel grief. And as a part of that grief, you may or are likely to feel anger, sadness, relief, fear, disappointment. That's a big one for a lot of people. Rejection, confusion, overwhelm. Honestly, anything in between that, right? But the goal is not to immediately just regulate those feelings away. Although I see you, if you are highly skilled in the regulation techniques, I celebrate you. But if you don't have acceptance as a part of that toolkit, and before you regulate, you're skipping a step. You really are. Trust me, it's going to come back. And I just don't want you to regulate that feeling away. Why? Because the goal of acceptance, why it's so effective, is the fact that you don't skip out on the part that is staying with yourself, while acceptance of the feelings that are naturally coming up move through you. So the goal is to stay with yourself while it moves through you, not just regulating it away so that it doesn't. And then step number 3, I wrote down here, agency and action, aka choice. Step number 3 is choosing the next aligned action for you. Keyword, big old asterisk on that one. Ask yourself, given what is true, what is the next honest step? Not the freaking perfect step, not the forever decision, the next honest step. And then rest. Tell the truth. Set the boundary. Ask for support. Just stop chasing the evidence that was never there, that is not there. Take one small action that is actually based on and in reality. This will give you back your life force energy. You can still be a storyteller, just one that isn't rejecting reality. So, if this is something in your life that you have been resisting, not because you're wrong, but because accepting it would hurt, I want you to be gentle with yourself. Because acceptance is not about forcing yourself to be okay. It is about the opposite of that. It's about telling the truth with enough compassion that you can finally choose what comes next. And lastly, my friends, acceptance is not giving up. It is giving yourself back the energy that you were spending just burning up, arguing with reality. And sometimes that is the beginning of your next real choice. And if you want to dig a little bit deeper, you want to actually go a little bit further in the specific practical application in your world, join me and other evolvers at EVE Reflections, where we will dig into this together as a community, where you're not alone and where you are working on this with other evolvers. Click the link in the show notes. You'll get access to that. And I'm excited to continue this work together as we evolve together. Take care, everyone. Until next time, keep evolving.